Meet Claude. With Claude, there's something more important to get right before prompting, tweaking, or optimizing. What is it? Expectations. Claude is not a faster version of other AI tools. It doesn't behave the same way or reward the same habits. However, it offers many great features that can change how you work with AI. So, this lesson is about building the right mental model. And once you get it, everything else will become easier. First impressions matter. Many people try Claude after using other tools and feel something is off. The answers may seem cautious. The creativity may feel restrained. Sometimes, Claude asks clarifying questions instead of jumping in. This isn't a limitation. It's a signal. Claude is optimized for a different kind of work. How Claude approaches problems. Claude is designed to reason carefully before responding. Instead of guessing what you want, it tries to collect context, understand intent, consider implications, avoid oversimplified conclusions. This makes Claude especially strong at tasks where clarity, nuance, and structure matter more than speed. Thus, Claude shines when the task involves thinking, not just generating. It performs especially well when you need to. Work through complex ideas, analyze long or detailed material, refine writing or arguments, explore sensitive or ambiguous topics. In these situations, Claude's careful approach becomes a real advantage. Where Claude struggles, that same careful design can feel limiting in other contexts. Claude may struggle when the task goal is vague, the prompt relies on guesswork, you ask for something creative without boundaries, speed matters more than depth. When this happens, Claude is waiting for clearer direction. Considering the above, which request do you think is most likely to produce a weak or frustrating response from Claude? Summarize this 40-page report and highlight the key trade-offs. Review this argument and point out logical gaps. Write something creative about anything you want. Help me think through a sensitive workplace decision. A different kind of creativity. Claude can be creative, but not in a chaotic way. Its creativity tends to be thoughtful rather than flashy, grounded rather than wild, guided by structure and intent. If you give Claude a clear frame, it explores deeply inside it. If you give it nothing, it plays it safe. Claude, compared to other AI tools. If you've used tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, or DeepSeek, Claude may feel familiar at first, but the differences show up quickly once tasks become more complex. These models aren't better or worse overall. They're optimized for different kinds of thinking and different working styles. Claude and ChatGPT. Different priorities. ChatGPT, an AI assistant known for fast conversational responses and wide-ranging task flexibility, is optimized for speed, flexibility, and conversational flow. It often jumps into a task quickly, even when the goal is loosely defined. Claude takes a more deliberate approach. It prefers clarity before action, and tends to reason through implications before producing an answer. Imagine you ask both tools, help me write a welcome email for new customers. ChatGPT will likely jump straight into a draft, friendly, upbeat, ready to send, fast and useful if you just need something now. Claude is more likely to pause and ask, what kind of customers? What tone fits your brand? Is there a specific action you want them to take? It wants to understand before it writes. The result? ChatGPT gives you a quick starting point. Claude gives you a more tailored outcome, but only after you give it direction. Quick tip. So, in practice, ChatGPT feels energetic and improvisational. Claude feels reflective and careful. ChatGPT often excels at rapid ideation and quick drafts. Claude stands out when structure, nuance, and correctness matter more than speed. Claude and Gemini. Focus versus breadth. Gemini, Google's AI assistant, designed to work across many tasks and integrate with Google's ecosystem of tools, is designed to work across a wide range of tasks and environments. It adapts quickly and often shines when tasks involve integrations, tools, or fast synthesis. In turn, Claude focuses more narrowly on reasoning quality and language consistency. It's especially strong at maintaining coherence across long conversations or large documents. Say you paste a 20-page contract and ask, What should I watch out for? Gemini might scan quickly, pull key terms, and give you a broad summary with links to relevant resources. Efficient and wide-ranging. Claude is more likely to walk through the document section by section, flag specific clauses that could create risk, and explain why each one matters in plain language. Gemini covers more ground faster. Claude goes deeper on fewer things, and keeps its reasoning consistent from start to finish. Quick tip. So, in practice, Gemini feels broad and adaptive. Claude feels focused and steady. Claude is often the better choice when sustained attention and depth are required. Claude and DeepSeek, caution versus speed. DeepSeek, an AI assistant known for efficient, fast responses and strong performance on technical tasks, is optimized for efficiency and rapid problem solving. It tends to move quickly from prompt to output, often producing confident answers even when instructions are minimal. Claude takes a more cautious path. It prioritizes understanding the full context before responding, and is more likely to slow down, clarify, or hedge when information is incomplete. Imagine you ask both tools, what are the risks of expanding into a new market? DeepSeek will likely give you a quick, confident list. Market saturation, regulatory hurdles, currency risk, and move on. Efficient and to the point. Claude is more likely to ask what kind of market, what industry you're in, and what your current position looks like before answering. Then, it'll walk through each risk with context specific to your situation. DeepSeek gets you a fast overview. Claude gets you a more tailored analysis, but needs more from you up front. Quick tip. So, in practice, DeepSeek feels fast, direct, and assertive. Claude feels careful, reflective, and deliberate. DeepSeek can be useful for rapid technical exploration. Claude is better suited for tasks where nuance, correctness, and long-term consistency matter. Overall, when tasks are simple, the differences between models can feel minor. As complexity increases, patterns emerge. Claude asks clarifying questions more often. Claude avoids guessing. Claude maintains tone and logic over long responses. This can feel slower at first, but it often reduces rewrites, corrections, and misunderstandings later. Match the tool to the task. You've seen how these tools differ. Now, let's put that knowledge to work. In the next exercises, you'll need to recognize which tool best fits the given context. Now, imagine you're working on a long document where clarity, consistency, and careful reasoning matter more than speed. Which tool fits best? Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT. Well done. To sum it all up, working with Claude requires a small mindset shift. The key thing to take away from this lesson is that with Claude, you'll get better results by asking, here's what I'm trying to solve. Let's think it through. Not, can you do this for me? Claude responds best when treated as a collaborator. Looking ahead. Now that you understand how Claude approaches problems, the next step is to explore where this careful thinking really pays off. Claude's features. So, in this unit, you'll get hands-on with projects, persistent workspaces that keep your context, instructions, and files organized across conversations. Artifacts, documents, code, and other outputs Claude generates right inside the chat, ready to edit and export. These aren't just nice extras. They're what make Claude feel less like a chatbot and more like a workspace. Are you ready? In the next lesson, you'll start with projects, a way to keep context and goals consistent across longer work. Ready to uncover Claude's full potential? Working with projects. Have you ever started a new chat to continue working on something, only to realize that AI doesn't remember what you discussed before? You end up re-explaining your goals, repeating constraints, and rebuilding context from scratch. The more complex the task, the more frustrating this gets. Claude's Projects is a feature designed to solve exactly this. Let's see how it works. Scenario: planning a renovation. Imagine you're planning a home renovation. You want to estimate a rough budget, think through the order of work, compare materials, revisit decisions as new constraints appear. You open Claude and start asking questions. What's most likely to happen if you plan a multi-step renovation entirely in separate, one-off chats? Claude refuses to help. The answers become incorrect. You keep re-explaining context and correcting earlier assumptions. The conversation becomes faster over time. Feeling the friction. You ask about flooring, then about plumbing and lighting. Each answer is helpful on its own, but none of them remember the bigger picture you're building. Earlier constraints fade unless you restate them. The problem isn't Claude's reasoning, it's the lack of a stable frame. A different approach. This is where projects come in. It is a dedicated workspace where you set up your context once, and Claude carries it across every conversation inside it. To create a project, go to the Projects section in the interface. Click on the New Project button, name it, and give a short description of what this project is for. Then, there are two key spaces that you need to fill. Instructions, where you describe your goals, constraints, and preferences in plain language. Files, where you can attach any documents related to your work. In the context of a renovation example, these might be floor plans, quotes, or reference images. As a result, every time you start a new chat inside the project, Claude will automatically see those instructions and files. You don't paste them again. They're just there. In this sense, it's like giving Claude a briefing before every conversation, without actually having to brief it every time. In the context of renovation planning, this approach will make Claude always see the overall goal, previous decisions, constraints you've already discussed. Claude will always remember everything related to your project. Setting up a project. To set up such a project, start by describing the whole context once in the instruction space, the size of the apartment, your rough budget range, the rooms involved, what matters most, cost, speed, quality, or style. It will become the foundation that everything else builds on. In addition, you can also break the plan into phases and instruct Claude on what should happen first, which steps depend on others, where decisions can wait. This will help Claude to memorize the overall plan and respond effectively in every chat inside the project. To make this clearer, imagine you want to discuss flooring and lighting separately without mixing everything into one long chat. With the project set up, you can simply open a new chat inside it for each phase. One for flooring, another for lighting, a third for plumbing. Each chat stays focused, but Claude will still know your overall budget, priorities, and earlier decisions. This gives you two things at once. You're no longer re-explaining your full situation every time you ask a question. Claude already has the context. And you keep everything organized, with each phase in its own conversation, instead of buried in one endless thread. Revising without resetting. Now, imagine that a week later, you get new contractor quotes. The budget changes. Does it mean that you should start it all over again? Before projects, this would have indeed been an issue. But with this feature, not at all. A week later, you receive new contractor quotes, and your budget changes. What do you think is the best way to handle this inside a project? Either delete the project and start a new one with updated numbers, or re-explain the entire renovation plan in a new chat. Ignore the new quotes and keep working with the original budget. Update the project instructions with new budget and continue from where you left off. That's the core idea behind projects. They're not a one-time setup you need to get perfect. They're a living workspace where context builds up gradually and priorities can shift. Claude keeps up without losing the thread. A practical way to use projects. Here's the simple pattern that works well. 1. Set the direction. 2. Explore options. 3. Revisit decisions. 4. Adjust constraints. 5. Refine the plan. You don't need perfect prompts, just continuity. Projects aren't the same everywhere. You may have seen a similar projects feature in other tools, like ChatGPT. While the name is the same, the experience is different. In Claude, a project acts as a shared thinking space. Claude actively reasons with the accumulated context. Earlier decisions shape later suggestions without constant reminders. In ChatGPT, projects are closer to an organizational layer, useful for grouping work, but less opinionated about how context shapes reasoning. This difference shows up over time. Claude projects emphasize continuity and coherence. ChatGPT projects emphasize access and organization. Neither is better in general, but Claude's approach is especially helpful when decisions build on each other. Where Claude's projects shine. Claude's projects feel strongest when the work itself is evolving. They're especially useful for planning that requires revisiting assumptions, long-form writing with a consistent direction, learning complex topics over time, and comparing options and trade-offs repeatedly. In these cases, continuity isn't just convenient, it actively improves the quality of thinking. Which situation do you think benefits most from being handled inside a project? Translating a paragraph into another language, getting feedback on a single slide deck, developing a marketing strategy that evolves over several weeks, summarizing a news article. Wrapping up. In this lesson, you learned how projects give Claude a persistent memory for your work through instructions, files, and organized conversations that all share the same context. Now, you can use this feature confidently. We used a renovation as an example, but as you saw in the quiz, this can be applied to anything that involves ongoing, multi-stage work, marketing plans, business strategies, research, content development, and many more. Anytime decisions build on each other over days or weeks, projects will keep everything connected. What's next? In the next lesson, you'll go one step further by working with artifacts, a powerful feature that lets you build, revise, and refine something tangible. That's where your creativity starts to take real shape. See you there. Build. Don't just ask. Did you know that, with Claude, you can build something you can actually look at, a web page, a form, a document layout? Normally, Claude gives you text. That's great for explanations, but not so great when you need to see how something looks or works. That's where artifacts come in. And that's what this lesson is about. More than just text. You may have heard that AI tools can help you design things like websites, forms, dashboards, or even simple apps. And Claude can do all of that with artifacts. They let Claude show you the result right inside the chat, live, visual, and ready to refine on the spot. A familiar loop. To see why this matters, imagine asking Claude to design a simple registration form. Without artifacts, Claude will generate the code. Then, you have to copy it and open it somewhere else. Check how it looks, adjust, and repeat. The idea works, but the process is slow and scattered. What do you think is the main problem in this workflow? Claude doesn't generate good code. The explanation isn't detailed enough. You keep switching tools to see results. The task is too complex. Artifacts remove that friction. Instead of copying code back and forth, Claude shows you the result in a visual window right next to your conversation. You see the actual form, page, or document, not just a description of it. And if something needs changing, you ask Claude directly and watch it update. Now, before diving into the details of how artifacts work, let's get a feel for when they're actually useful versus when a regular chat response does the job. How to access artifacts. Artifacts are available directly in Claude's interface. To enable or check them, 1. Open your profile settings. 2. Find the Capabilities section. 3. Toggle the features on. Once enabled, Claude will automatically open artifacts when visualization is helpful. They're supported across most subscription plans. You can also access artifacts, yours and pre-made, from a separate tab on the left. There, you can find some pre-existing artifacts that you can customize to your needs. Or you can click on a New Artifact button to create a completely new artifact with all instructions set by yourself. How artifacts appear in Claude. Once the artifact is created and you start working with it, it will have two main viewing modes. Preview shows how the result looks or behaves. Code shows the underlying source, when applicable. Below is an example of a Claude-generated portfolio page, where you can switch between these two modes instantly. Scenario: Promo website. Now that you have learned the essentials, imagine that you want to build a website to promote your catering services. Let's see how Claude can help with prototyping real quick. There's your starting point. You picked a category, and Claude asked for details about what you want to build. Let's provide them in the next task. Nice job. Here's what Claude created. The first draft is ready. What do you think should be your next step with this website? Keep it as it is, and show the audience. Make a few edits in the color palette. Add the details and personalization in the text. Editing without breaking everything. Artifacts are designed for targeted edits. You can highlight a specific section, text, code, or layout, and ask Claude to modify only that part. This avoids rewriting entire documents, breaking working sections, wasting usage limits. It also keeps iteration focused. See how that works? You didn't start over or rebuild the whole page. one focused request, and Claude updated just the part that needed attention, while keeping everything else intact. Iteration is the real power. As you can see, artifacts shine when ideas evolve. You can experiment with layouts, test styles, explore alternatives, compare versions. Also, artifacts include version history, so you can navigate changes instead of losing work. So, with Workflow, you can create different things in different powerful output formats, including interactive web elements, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, documents, and formatted text SVG graphics and diagrams, scalable visuals like flowcharts, icons, or illustrations, dashboards, and data visualizations. All of this is part of the same artifact system. Claude simply picks the best format for what you're building. Great job. To wrap up, you now know how to recognize when an artifact is needed, access and manage artifacts in Claude, iterate safely and precisely, and move from ideas to usable outputs. Artifacts turn Claude into more than a conversational partner. They make it a workspace for building. Next, you'll learn how to guide Claude's reasoning and creativity more deliberately with different tool-specific prompting techniques. This is important because knowing what Claude can do is only half the picture. The real skill is learning how to ask, and that's what you're about to explore. Stay tuned. Complex webs of knowledge. Most questions you ask Claude focus on one topic at a time, but real-world problems rarely stay. Complex webs of knowledge. Most questions you ask Claude focus on one topic at a time, but real-world problems rarely stay in one lane. They touch multiple areas, and the best answers come from connecting those areas together. In this lesson, you'll learn how to guide Claude to think across different fields at once, so it spots patterns and relationships you might otherwise miss. Cross-domain analysis. Imagine you're curious about how artificial intelligence is changing the world. You could ask Claude about AI in healthcare, or AI in education, or AI in manufacturing. Each answer would be useful on its own. But what if you asked Claude to look at all three at once and compare how the same technology plays out differently in each field? That's cross-domain analysis. This approach pushes Claude to analyze one idea across multiple areas side by side. When it does, it often reveals connections and contrasts that you'd miss by looking at each field separately. See? The prompt encouraged Claude to think across domains and explore how the same innovation might produce different results in each. Let's move on. Systems thinking approach. Now, imagine you want to look at a company's work processes overall, instead of looking at separate fields. Product development, marketing, and customer support aren't independent. They're all connected, and you want to explore these interactions. That's where systems thinking comes in. Instead of analyzing areas separately, it focuses on how different parts of a system interact and influence each other. Again, consider a company as a system. A change in one area, like accelerating product releases, can affect support workload and marketing timelines. Systems thinking helps reveal these interdependencies. Great! By asking Claude to analyze interactions within a system, you encourage a more comprehensive understanding of how different parts influence each other. Identifying causal relationships. Causal relationships explore how changes in one area can cause effects in another. By focusing on cause and effect dynamics, you encourage Claude to uncover deeper insights about how different factors influence each other. For example, how does a pricing change in a subscription service affect customer retention, usage patterns, and revenue forecasting? The causal relationship approach can help you find answers to such questions. Well done! See, by focusing on the causal relationships between a change and its broader effects, you'll guide Claude to develop more insightful connections. Let's move to the next technique, exploring ripple effects. Ripple effects are the broader, longer-term consequences that follow from an initial change as a stone dropped into water. For example, when a company shifts to remote work, the first effect hits team collaboration, but over time, it ripples outward into hiring, onboarding, performance tracking, and even office budgets. This technique asks Claude to trace that full chain of consequences. Think back to the AI example from earlier. Adoption doesn't just change healthcare or education on the surface, it sets off waves that reshape hiring, regulation, public trust, and more over time. Ripple effect analysis helps Claude map out those longer chains. Instead of stopping at the first impact, considering second-order consequences. Second-order consequences are the indirect, longer-term effects that show up after the initial change has settled in. For instance, automating routine tasks initially speeds things up, but what happens next? Skill requirements shift, training needs change, and eventually, the whole team structure evolves. Asking Claude to think about these deeper layers produces much richer answers. Excellent. Asking Claude to go beyond immediate results helps it uncover deeper effects, the kind that are easy to miss, but often matter most. Now, let's see if you can tell these techniques apart. Congratulations! You've explored the art of using the interconnected reasoning approaches in your prompts. This skill allows you to generate more comprehensive and insightful analyses, helping you tackle complex, multifaceted problems effectively. In the next lesson, you'll learn how to guide Claude through structured frameworks to analyze problems even more deeply and consistently. Enhancing Claude's analysis. Welcome to the next lesson in your exploration of Claude. Today, you'll see the tool in a different mode, not just answering questions, but structuring complex problems. Claude thinks in frameworks. When you ask Claude an open-ended question, it can organize its thinking through analytical frameworks. This turns a vague answer into a focused, structured one. And, while the examples here are business-focused, the same approach works for anything complex: career decisions, policy questions, creative projects, research. What just happened? Claude used a SWOT framework to structure that analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a way to evaluate any subject from 4 angles at once, covering both internal factors and external ones. Knowing the framework name is what lets you request it. That's the core skill here. Telling Claude which lens to use. Combining 2 frameworks. One framework gives you 1 angle. But what if you're building a product strategy and need to understand both what your company is good at and what the market looks like? That's when combining 2 frameworks in one prompt becomes powerful. Here are 2 frameworks worth knowing before you try it. VRIO, value, rarity, imitability, organization. breaks down what a company has going for it internally and whether those advantages are actually hard for competitors to copy. Porter's 5 Forces maps 5 sources of pressure that shape how competitive an industry is: new players entering, supplier influence, buyer power, substitute products, and rivalry between existing competitors. Together, they cover what neither can alone: internal capability and external competition. See how each framework did a different job? Fear.io looked inward, what the company already has. Porter's 5 Forces looked outward, what the market is doing to it. The combination gives you a more complete picture than either would alone. Applying frameworks in sequence. Sometimes, one framework feeds into the next. Instead of using them side by side, you apply them in order, where each step builds on what came before. Think of it as layers. First, you assess where things stand. Then you explore what could happen. And finally, you decide what to do about it. 3 frameworks that work well in sequence. BCG Matrix shows which of a company's products are growing, which are steady earners, and which are worth dropping. Scenario planning helps you think through multiple possible futures, instead of betting everything on one outcome. Tao's analysis takes your SWOT findings and turns them into actual next steps. The logic. First, assess what you have. Then, explore what could happen. Then, decide what to do with Claude. Great job. That prompt walked Claude through all 3 stages in order, and each one built on the last. The BCG matrix showed what the current portfolio looks like. Scenario planning opened up what the future might look like. Tao's turned those insights into an actual strategy. That's the power of sequential analysis. The output of one framework becomes the input for the next. Practical application. Now that you're familiar with different analytical frameworks, let's test what you've learned. Well done. You now know how to guide Claude through structured frameworks, individually, in combination, and in sequence. These techniques work for business strategy, but they apply just as well to any complex topic where you need organized, thorough analysis. In the next lesson, you'll explore how to stimulate Claude's creative abilities, to ignite that spark in the tool, and get interesting results. Until then, keep practicing with multiple frameworks to enhance your analytical capabilities. Claude's imaginative potential. Today, we'll explore techniques to encourage more creative and innovative responses from Claude. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to craft prompts, complex webs of knowledge. Most questions you ask Claude focus on enhancing Claude's analysis. Welcome to the next lesson in your exploration of Claude. Claude thinks in frameworks. What just happened? Claude used a SWOT framework to Claude's imaginative potential. Today, we'll explore techniques to encourage more creative and innovative responses from Claude. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to craft prompts that inspire Claude to generate original, imaginative, and unconventional ideas. Creative prompting involves using specific techniques to encourage Claude to generate more original, imaginative, and unconventional responses. Let's start with one of the most effective creativity techniques, introducing unusual scenarios. What if questions. You can inspire Claude by introducing unusual scenarios, combining unrelated concepts, or posing what if questions to spark out of the box thinking. Excellent. This prompt sets up an unusual scenario and asks for innovative solutions, which encourages Claude to think creatively and explore unconventional possibilities. Now that you've seen how to craft a creativity stimulating prompt, let's dive into specific techniques that can help you unlock Claude's full imaginative potential. Combining unrelated concepts. You already used one of them, unusual scenarios or what if questions. Next, combining unrelated concepts involves mixing ideas from different fields to generate unique solutions. When you combine unrelated concepts, you create unexpected connections that lead to new ways of thinking. Think of how you can describe an everyday object in terms of something completely unrelated. This creates a new function for the object in a different context. Reversing assumptions. Great. By combining a smartphone with the concept of a sentient being, you push Claude to think of new ways this object could function, leading to innovative ideas. Reversing assumptions. This technique is similar to the previous one. You flip conventional ideas or expectations. Which benefits can be achieved by using the reversing assumptions technique with Claude? It helps discover novel solutions by challenging conventional thinking. It encourages Claude to explore paths that contradict established norms. It can reveal hidden opportunities or overlooked alternatives. It simplifies complex problems by reducing variables. Now that you understand how reversing assumptions works, let's explore how metaphorical thinking can encourage abstract creativity. Encouraging metaphorical thinking. By comparing an idea to something seemingly unrelated, you help Claude explore new connections and generate unique responses. Great work. By comparing a car to a flowing river, Claude can explore how this metaphor shifts the function of the object, sparking abstract, creative responses. Imposing arbitrary constraints. By imposing arbitrary constraints, like limiting resources or time, you force Claude to think creatively within strict boundaries. This can lead to more inventive solutions, as constraints often inspire out of the box problem solving. Excellent. By limiting the materials and time, you've pushed Claude to think creatively, finding unique solutions under these constraints. Seeking multiple perspectives. Encouraging Claude to consider ideas from various viewpoints opens up a broader range of responses. When you ask for perspectives from different fields, experiences, or backgrounds, you push Claude to come up with well-rounded, creative solutions. Last task. Which creativity techniques work best for generating innovative product ideas? Combining unrelated concepts, like smartphone and living being. Imposing arbitrary constraints, such as limited materials or time. Seeking multiple perspectives from different fields. Using only technical language and specifications. Amazing job. You've learned multiple techniques to encourage more creative, original responses from Claude, from unusual scenarios to constraints and perspective shifts. These approaches help move beyond obvious ideas and explore unexpected possibilities. That's it for Unit 2. In our next lesson, we'll explore techniques for communicating with the tool across various use cases and scenarios in which Claude performs best. Get ready to connect the dots in new and insightful ways. Writing and editing. With Claude, you've written something important, a proposal, a report, an explanation that matters. The ideas are there, but something feels off. This is where most writing actually happens. Not in the first draft, but in the work that comes after. And this is where Claude makes a difference. The difference shows up in revision. Imagine you've drafted an internal memo about upcoming team changes. You know what you want to say, but reading it back, it feels scattered. Some parts sound too casual, others feel stiff. You could spend an hour rewriting it yourself, or you could hand it to Claude, not to replace what you wrote, but to refine it. Why do you think it's difficult to revise your own draft? You don't remember what you were trying to say. You're too close to the work to see where it's unclear. You lack the technical skill to improve it. Team. Some changes are coming up. Starting next month, Sarah's moving into the product lead role, which means her current responsibilities will shift to Marcus and Jen. We're also bringing on 2 new hires to support the launch, and they'll report directly to me for now. The project timeline isn't changing, but the way we're structuring work is going to look different. Let me know if you have questions. Notice what changed. The opening is more direct. Each point has its own paragraph, and the timeline now connects to what it means for the team. Notice what didn't change. Your tone, your information, your voice. It still sounds like you wrote it. Adjusting tone for different audiences. Sometimes, the structure is fine, but the tone doesn't suit the audience. You've written a project update for your manager. It's clear and complete, but it feels too informal for senior leadership. You need the same facts presented more formally, but without sounding stiff or mechanical. Draft example. Here's your draft. Hey, quick update on the Q4 rollout. We hit a snag with the vendor integration last week, but the team figured out a workaround. Should be back on track by next Friday. Budget's still good. Timeline's tight but doable. Let me know if you need more details. It's conversational and efficient. Perfect for your direct manager, but for an executive summary, too casual. After seeing Claude's answer, what's the most important difference between adjusting tone and rewriting content? Tone adjustment changes how something is said, not what is said. Tone adjustment is faster than rewriting content, and it works well for short documents. Maintaining coherence in long documents. While short writing is forgiving, long documents aren't. But with Claude as your proofreader, you shouldn't worry. Imagine you're finalizing a 20-page research report. Section 4 was written 2 weeks ago, and Section 9 was finished yesterday. The problem? This could result in some inconsistencies. For example, some of those inconsistencies are: Section 4 calls the framework Stakeholder Engagement Model. Section 9 calls it Participant Involvement Framework. Same concept, different terms. The conclusion references 3 core principles, but you actually outlined 4 in Section 6. These aren't obvious when you're editing piece by piece, but they weaken the document when someone reads it, start to finish. Why do you think this kind of review is difficult to do manually? It requires specialized knowledge about document structure. You lose track of earlier sections while focusing on later ones. Documents are too long to read multiple times. Writing that requires care. Another important thing. Some messages require more than clarity. They require care. You're writing an email to inform your team that a project they've worked on for months is being postponed indefinitely due to budget cuts. You need to be honest about what's happening, but you don't want it to sound cold or dismissive. Team, I need to let you know that the Atlas project is being postponed indefinitely due to budget reallocations at the company level. I know this is frustrating, since we've been working on it for 6 months, but the decision came from above, and there's nothing we can do about it right now. We'll reassign everyone to other projects next week. Thanks for your work on this. The information is there, but something feels off. Nothing we can do sounds dismissive. Thanks for your work feels like an afterthought. The message delivers bad news without acknowledging how difficult it actually is. Looking at that draft, what's the main problem with how the difficult news is delivered? It's too long and doesn't explain why the decision was made because of unnecessary details. It acknowledges the situation, but doesn't really validate how people might feel. This is where Claude's careful nature really shines. It considers how language lands, not just what it says. As a result, it can help to address difficult topics without oversimplifying them. See the difference? The revised version doesn't hide behind corporate language or rush past the impact. It names the difficulty directly and offers concrete next steps, not vague reassurances. Claude didn't soften the news or add false optimism. It made the message clearer and more honest. What you've learned. In this lesson, you've seen how Claude handles a draft, carefully, without rushing, and really getting what you meant to say. It makes your ideas clearer and your voice stronger. When writing needs to be accurate and appropriate, Claude's deliberate approach is exactly what's right for the task. Next, you'll see how Claude can help you in organizing complex information into something that makes sense. See you in the next lesson. Understanding, research, and synthesis. You're trying to figure something out. You found articles, advice, and different opinions. Now, you're thinking, what do I do with all this? Let's see how Claude can help. Scenario: conflicting health advice. You've been feeling tired lately. You want to understand why and what to do about it. So, you search online. You find an article saying you need more sleep, another saying it's probably your diet, a third claiming it's lack of exercise, one more suggesting it might be stress. Everyone sounds convincing, but no one agrees. What's the actual problem here? The sources are unreliable, so you need to find more information. You have information, but can't see what actually applies to you. The information doesn't go beyond the basics. You could spend hours rereading everything, taking notes, trying to remember what each source said. Or you could try something different, a faster way to make sense of it all, without wasting your mental energy. You copy the first article into Claude. Instead of asking for a summary, you ask, what's the main point this article is making about fatigue? Claude responds, this article argues that chronic fatigue often stems from sleep debt, not just sleeping too little one night, but consistently getting less sleep than your body needs over weeks or months. The key idea: your body keeps a sleep account that compounds over time. That's not what the article said word for word. It's what the article meant. Now, you paste two more sources, the diet article and the one about exercise. You ask, how do these three sources connect? Claude responds, all three identify fatigue as a symptom of resource depletion. Sleep article, depleted recovery time. Diet article, depleted nutrients. Exercise article, depleted cardiovascular capacity. The connecting thread, your body is running low on something it needs to function. See how this works? Instead of three separate summaries, Claude showed you the pattern linking them. What's the best thing about this approach, instead of reading three summaries separately? It's faster, and it removes contradictions. It shows you how the pieces fit together. It tells you which source is most important. When you don't understand something, sometimes you encounter a term you don't fully understand. For example, the stress article keeps mentioning cortisol dysregulation. You know cortisol is a stress hormone, but what does dysregulation really mean? Now, you understand it through contrasts. What it looks like in different situations. This is how Claude teaches, by building understanding through varied examples, making sense of long documents. Sometimes, the challenge isn't multiple sources, it's one very long source. Imagine your friend sends a 40-page report on workplace wellness programs. You need to understand what it recommends, but you don't have time to read all of it. You upload it to Claude and ask, what are the most important recommendations this report makes? Claude responds, wellness programs fail when they're optional add-ons. The report argues they should be integrated into normal work structure, not separate wellness activities. Mental health support needs to be proactive, not reactive. Waiting for people to ask for help means they've already been struggling too long. Leadership participation matters more than program budget. Programs with engaged leadership and modest budgets outperform expensive programs with disengaged leadership. In this response, Claude went beyond the executive summary and picked out the key ideas from the entire report. What makes this more useful than reading the executive summary? It removes technical language, which makes it shorter. It extracts what actually matters, based on your question. It highlights the most recent information. You follow up. What trade-offs does this report acknowledge, and what does it not address? Claude responds, acknowledged, time investment versus immediate productivity. Not addressed, how to implement this in remote or hybrid teams. The entire report assumes in-person work. That's analysis, seeing what's there and what's missing. Why do you think noticing missing considerations is valuable? It helps you find errors in the document. It reveals assumptions the author made without stating them. It shows which sections were written carelessly. Finding unexpected connections. The hardest kind of synthesis happens when sources don't obviously relate. Think back to the fatigue problem. You've got your health articles, but you also remember reading something about productivity systems and decision fatigue. Could these ideas be connected? As you could see from the answer, Claude went beyond summarizing and highlighted the link between the ideas in your situation. This is synthesis, seeing patterns that only emerge when you consider multiple ideas simultaneously. What you just learned. In this lesson, you've learned to use Claude for sense-making. Its extended context and careful reasoning become essential when you have information, but need understanding. In a nutshell, Claude can find patterns across sources, explain through teaching, identify what's present and what's missing, and connect ideas that don't naturally relate. With this in mind, you'll next see how Claude assists in looking at things critically and strategically. Keep it up. Strategic thinking and critical review. Making decisions is not easy, especially when it's the kind where every option has pros and cons, and the right answer depends on what you're willing to give up. This is where most decisions actually get uncomfortable, and where Claude can help you. Scenario: should you take the job? You've been offered a new job. It pays 30% more, and it's fully remote. You'd lose the in-person team you currently enjoy, but you'd gain more flexibility, something that matters a lot to you. Your friend says, take it. More money is always better. Your partner says, think about work-life balance. Remote can be draining. Your mentor says, small companies are risky. Stay where you have stability. Everyone is confident, and no one agrees. What makes this decision hard? You don't have enough information, and you're overthinking it. The advice contradicts itself. Every option involves trade-offs, with no clear winner. You open Claude and describe the situation. Then you ask, what am I actually trading off if I take this job? Claude responds, you're trading immediate financial improvement for relational and structural uncertainty. The 30% raise is concrete, but you're exchanging known team dynamics for unknown ones and established processes for ambiguity. The question isn't which is better, it's which uncertainty you're more willing to navigate. That changes the frame. The problem is no longer, what's the right answer? It's, which trade-off fits you? After that, you follow up. What am I not considering? Claude responds, you're focusing on the job itself. Pay, team, responsibilities. You haven't mentioned how remote work affects your living situation. Do you have a dedicated workspace? These logistics sound minor, but they shape daily experience more than salary does. You pause. You hadn't considered that your current apartment doesn't really have space for a proper home office. Why is, what am I not considering useful? It finds errors in your reasoning. It reveals blind spots you weren't aware of. It makes the decision easier. It tells you the right answer. Exploring alternatives. Choosing between two options can feel hard, but sometimes the real work is realizing there might be a third option you haven't considered. You ask Claude, is there a version of this decision I'm not seeing? Claude responds, you're treating this as binary. Take the new job or stay. But you haven't explored whether negotiation changes the equation. Can you negotiate remote work at your current company? The binary choice might be self-imposed. Wait, you could actually ask your company for remote work. Stress testing. Your reasoning. You're leaning toward staying at your current job and negotiating remote work. But you want to make sure you're not just avoiding change. You ask Claude, What's the strongest argument against my reasoning? That's uncomfortable to read, but that's exactly what makes it so useful. Claude didn't attack your reasoning. It strengthened your thinking by showing you where it might be weak. Why should you deliberately seek arguments against your own reasoning? To find the objectively correct answer. To test whether your reasoning holds up under scrutiny. To avoid making mistakes. To gather more opinions. Evaluating constraints. Every decision has constraints, deadlines, resources, expectations, but sometimes we treat constraints as absolute, when they're actually flexible. You tell Claude, I need to decide within 2 weeks, because that's when the offer expires. Claude responds, that's a real constraint, but is it negotiable? Have you asked if the deadline can be extended? Most offers have some flexibility if you're genuinely considering them. Treating the deadline as fixed might be creating unnecessary pressure. You assumed the deadline was final and hadn't even thought to ask. In this sense, what's the difference between a real constraint and an assumed one? Real constraints are external. Assumed constraints are internal. Real constraints can't change. Assumed constraints haven't been tested. Real constraints are written down. Assumed constraints are verbal. Real constraints matter more than assumed constraints. When there's no right answer, some decisions don't resolve into a single correct choice. They resolve into priorities. As a result, they have different answers that work for different priorities. Claude won't decide for you, but it will help you see the decision more clearly. Claude clarifies trade-offs, reveals blind spots, tests your reasoning, and questions your assumptions. It surfaces trade-offs. It reveals blind spots. It tests your reasoning. It questions your assumptions. So, when there's no obvious answer, that kind of thinking support matters. You've now seen Claude's core strengths: careful reasoning, thoughtful analysis, and deliberate judgment. Next, you'll look at the bigger picture, when Claude is the right tool to reach for, and when something else will serve you better. The goal is to build workflows where each tool does what it does best. Using Claude alongside other tools. Working on something most often requires multiple steps: research, thinking, drafting, refining. That's why some tasks often call for more than a single AI tool. The question is, which one fits a specific step? Scenario: choosing a health insurance plan. Let's say you need to pick a health insurance plan during open enrollment. Therefore, you need to understand what the different plans actually cover, figure out which matters for your situation, compare the real costs, and make sure you're not missing something important. Each step needs something different. You can use Google for a traditional search, or try ChatGPT's web search feature for quick summaries alongside sources. Either way works. What matters is gathering the information you need. You decide to go traditional and use Google to search for information about the plan options. This is what you find: comparison charts, coverage details, explanations of terms like deductible and out of pocket maximum. Within 15 minutes, you have the information, but it's dense and confusing. What do you need at this point? More sources about insurance and a summary of each plan's features. To understand what these differences actually mean for you, a recommendation on which plan to choose. So, bring everything to Claude by pasting the details of 3 different plans, and it will help you understand the differences. Now, you understand what these differences actually mean for your situation. That's synthesis that you learned. Claude took complex information and made it relevant to you. Checking your thinking. You're leaning toward Plan B, but you want to make sure you're not overlooking something. What if you end up needing more care than usual next year? You could continue with Claude, but you want a quick stress test of your reasoning from a different perspective. You open ChatGPT, describe the context, and ask, I'm choosing Plan B because I only see doctors 2 to 3 times yearly. What am I not considering? ChatGPT responds quickly. Consider unexpected health events, specialist visits that aren't primary care, prescription coverage differences, whether you're planning any major health changes, surgery, physical therapy, pregnancy, and whether you have dependents. Fast response, useful prompts. But these are general considerations, not an analysis of your specific situation. Next, you bring ChatGPT's list back to Claude, along with your plan details. But why bring ChatGPT's output to Claude, instead of just asking ChatGPT to analyze further? ChatGPT can't do a detailed analysis. Therefore, Claude gives more accurate information. ChatGPT has already finished its task. Claude handles deeper reasoning about specific trade-offs when given full context. This is strategic thinking. You practiced earlier. Claude evaluated which considerations actually matter for your specific situation. You have a confident decision now. Plan B. Communicating your decision. You need to email HR to confirm your enrollment and explain your choice for their records. You could write it yourself or draft it quickly with another tool. Gemini. This This draft has all the information, but reading it back, it sounds stiff and overly formal for your workplace culture. What do you need now? A complete rewrite or a second draft from a different tool? Tone adjustment while keeping the information? To add more detail about why you chose Plan B? See? That's writing and editing in action. Claude refined what another tool drafted. Each tool played its role. This is how tools work together. Search tools, fast information gathering, ChatGPT or Gemini, quick generation and drafts. Claude, deep understanding, strategic evaluation, careful refinement. So, the workflow is about knowing when to switch between them. You've learned when Claude adds the most value, when you need to understand, evaluate, or refine. The moments where careful thinking matters more than speed. Farewell. You've completed the Claude Guide. You understand how Claude thinks, when to use it, and how to combine it with other tools for better results. What you've learned here is just the foundation. The real skill comes from practice, using Claude for your actual work, discovering what works for your specific needs, and building workflows that fit how you think. Now, go use it. You're ready.